Welcome back to Bots and Thoughts, the hyperautomation podcast, sponsored by Salient Process. I'm your host, Jimmy Hewitt, aka Mr. Automation. Hello, listeners, and welcome to another exciting special guest episode with a longtime friend of Salient Process, the one and only Peter Malek. Loaded with experience and insights, Peter has absolutely been there and done that in the world of hyperautomation. From having founded VMware's process discovery and robotic process automation practice to now leading productivity at Experian, Peter imparts his view of continuous improvement so that we can all learn from him. From his focus on people to how to mature from RPA into workflow, there are golden nuggets all over this episode, and I hope you enjoy this conversation live from Opex Orlando. Well, thanks again for being on Bots and Thoughts, Peter.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for the invite.
Of course. Really looking forward to this conversation.
Likewise.
I'd love to start with getting to know you a bit.
Yeah.
So for starters, who is Peter Malek? And tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so let me try to keep this short because I'm definitely not short of words. But Peter Malek, my background academically, MIS major, Management Information Systems, with double major in decision sciences, statistics, and then went on to do my master's in systems engineering. I have some specializations kind of in executive education and organizational change management, as well as artificial intelligence, strategy for AI through MIT. And then outside of that, Lean Six Sigma specialization. So, certified as a master black belt, started my journey with Motorola as a green belt, and then graduated my way up over the years when I came to be first introduced to it. I call myself somebody that's always focused on process improvement, even in my personal life, because I've grown up playing sports, rode crew in college, was a personal trainer, even right after I graduated on the side, when I was first working in my first engineering job. It was kind of my side hustle. And so I always like to say, like, process improvement is like personal training for business.
Yes.
And so I see this like crossover between what I've continued to focus on and be passionate about for myself and others outside of my professional environment, and then what I do on the professional side for the companies that I've had the fortune to work for. So
that's awesome. You seem very aligned, personally and professionally. Continuous improvement, personally and professionally.
I've been lucky.
Yeah, and Experian's lucky to have you. You lead productivity for them. They say it's just as much of a mindset, continuous improvement, as it is a set of technical skills. And it seems like you have both, which, again, Experian's lucky to have you.
I appreciate that.
But here we are at Opex, Operational Excellence. Everyone here, all 250, 350 people, have their own definition of Opex. So I'd love your definition. And if I may ask, what are the different circles, if you will, that comprise your Venn diagram of Opex?
Yeah, no, I think that's a fantastic question. Boy, and I've been around process improvement since probably about 3 years into my professional career from a specialization standpoint, when I started my journey and kind of, let's call it, formal training on process improvement from a Lean Six Sigma standpoint. So that's now been almost 17 years to the day since I was first introduced to it. So I'd like to say I've seen a lot of environments and been in a lot of situations to be able to kind of think through this over the years and share my thought.
Which you've captured in your book.
Yeah, which I've captured in my book to some extent.
Check it out.
Yeah, Perform, Path of Becoming Unstoppable and Achieving Fulfillment. But I would say it's about having my definition of Opex is a seamless, meaningful, measurable ecosystem, right? Where the people are able to focus on performing the tasks that they love and solving problems and innovating. That's kind of my way of describing it, right?
Yeah.
And so you talked about a Venn diagram, right? And I don't want to be the one that goes people, process, technology.
Yeah, people, process, technology.
I think that's what everybody defaults
Sure.
to. I think operational excellence is maybe let's take it a different way. It's culture, right? It's enablement, right? So maybe that's maybe culture is the people part of it, but culture and enablement, change management, yeah. But also I think enablement also using it loosely, maybe more empowerment of giving people the ability to make decisions and execute against them themselves, right? I don't think anybody likes to be held back by rules and layers of approval if they don't have to be. So give people room to learn or fail fast and quickly and try new things until they figure out a way to do it better.
That's very empowering.
Right. And then, I think the last piece, it's funny because I think my Venn diagram is all around, now that I'm thinking about it, it's all people related. That's where the success lies for operational excellence. Because I think the technology and the processes and all that still stems from, do you have the sponsorship and the buy-in to do this? Is it part of the culture that you're building and focused on investing in?
Yeah.
And so maybe the last component of it with this kind of unpacking of people is that strategy alignment and executive sponsorship with the right people on board that really truly will unlock that potential. Because if your leaders are on board, they're going to invest in the necessary technologies, they're going to invest in the necessary skill set in training. So I mean, I don't know. That's kind of where I would go with it.
That's great. Yeah. I'd love to keep pulling at the people piece because process improvement, Six Sigma, filling out an A3, mapping out a process can be sterile. It can be done in a vacuum where you have your black belt team that does those things. But those concepts are important. A3s are important. Process maps are important. So how can we introduce the people element in conjunction with, say, process mapping?
No, so it's a great point. So I think adaptability and flexibility and how you're teaching people to pick up and leverage and apply best practices and techniques that can help them to improve how they work, right? So one of the ingredients I've found from one company to the next that I've worked for, from management consulting all the way to being the productivity leader within the companies that I've worked for, is making it palatable and simple enough for anybody to be able to pick up and apply. And so
that's hard to do.
It can be, but it doesn't have to be, right? So it's how do you put basic concepts and tools in the hands of individuals that allow them to start applying it in increments and picking up these skills and learning them. And then as they master those skills, just add to it a little bit versus try to train and certify them on a suite of methods and problem solving and tools and templates, right? Why not just find one or two things that they could immediately apply in their day-to-day and start introducing those concepts and tools. Plant that seed, right?
Yeah, watch it grow.
Maybe it starts with, the tomato garden, right? Of how do you just map a process? Then maybe you're like, I want to add some cucumbers. Okay, well, let's teach them how to do some stakeholder analysis. Maybe, or pick a tool, like FMEA, a failure modes and effects analysis.
Some simulations.
Yeah, some simulations. Now you're getting into some really, really intricate vegetables or fruit that you're trying to grow in your garden.
You've got a maize crop.
Yeah,
corn and peppers feeding into each other.
So that which take a little more advanced skill set. But hey, maybe once they've graduated from becoming that novice or beginner farmer in their vegetable garden, they're ready to take on.
And they want to.
And
like exercise for your business, you see,
that's right.
Yourself improving and you want more.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. There's levels to this.
So I think that, something perhaps that hasn't been explored enough is not just how do you simplify how you educate and train individuals from a curriculum standpoint, because I've seen plenty of companies do that. How do you, again, take away the overwhelming terminology and break it down into layman terms or business terms that aren't tied to necessarily a specific framework or methodology so that people can connect with it. But more importantly, I think there's even taking a step back further from that and saying, okay, well, baby steps. Let's crawl before we walk before we run, right? Run before we start to fly with what we're trying to get somebody to consume and adopt and apply. There was a speaker today that I think mentioned this in their keynote about you have to go slower than what leadership and you as a process transformation leader even would like to see things move at to be successful in getting individuals to adopt and accept change. And so if somebody's never learned that tool or wasn't from that same academic background where that type of thinking will connect with them immediately, which there's far and fewer between where that's the case, then it means we really should be slowing down. How do we approach these things with these individuals if we want them to truly absorb it, accept it, learn it, and
stick with it? Yeah,
exactly.
So how does that work? Not to talk about myself, but personally, I am a let's get it done now type of person. I feel like you're similar in your personal life as well. We want results now. Since you're a doer, right? Impatience is something I'm working on, especially with goal achievement. So translate that into enterprise productivity optimization. How do you throttle your own internal drive to achieve results sooner, knowing that by slowing your roll, you will achieve more faster in the long run? How does that work? How do you do that?
Well, I wish I could tell you I had the one answer that was the solution to it all, but I think it's a combination of levers that you have to pull. So in most cases, if I think back to organizations like VMware, where I led up our business process excellence practice and RPA, and the productivity role that I'm in at Experian with our consumer information services. I think it's how I've kind of calibrated around that is a couple different ways. One, usually when there is a transformation program, there is a specialized set of very well-trained, highly skilled, certified individuals that have a statistics, Lean Six Sigma, design thinking,
data science
type, type background, systems engineering, industrial engineering, academic background, combined with different certifications and specialization. And that team is usually being deployed on projects to help facilitate and apply the methods that they have come to master a craft around. So that's not going to stop.
Right.
So some of it is making sure you're more strategic with how you deploy those assets, right? In terms of prioritizing and focusing on the right, and focusing on the right projects. But then when it comes to building the culture that you're going to also be working on in parallel to that, I think it's a different measure of success. And this is where there's probably there has to be a philosophical conversation with leadership around, well, what's our end game? If we're trying to transform the organization, depending on the size of the organization too.
What's the North Star?
Yeah, what's the North Star? But more importantly, if we're trying to turn this culture around, that doesn't happen in a year. That doesn't happen in a month.
As badly as you want it to.
As badly as you want it to. And we also don't want to lose the talent and the skills that we have within the organization
along the way. Forcing it.
Yes, because then we have another dilemma, which is, okay, we have this new culture, but now we have to replace individuals, and now we have a skill set gap and a learning curve with how we operate. So one of the strategies I've used in the past, and it went well, was calibrating on how do we measure even the application and use of smaller incremental tools within the larger toolbox or suite of methods. Hey, let's teach somebody how to process map, just the basics. How do we start to poll and survey and monitor how many people across the organization are using process mapping methods and skills just as part of guiding conversations, solving problems, documenting processes within their teams,
achieving goals.
Yeah. It doesn't necessarily need to be that they mapped a process, came up with a future state, automated it, and got an ROI of some sort. Even if we just get them to start using that mindset and tooling in the way that they're thinking and engaging with others on their teams, that would be considered a win.
Sure. That's your tomato plant.
That's right. That's their tomato plant. Then how do you introduce concepts? Okay, now you've mastered this whole concept of documenting a process, and that's become second nature to you in terms of, it's autopilot. When you're thinking through something, you take out a scrappy piece of paper and you sketch down 5 or 6 blocks to kind of map it out. Now that's kind of, that's part of your day-to-day way of thinking. And you're not an industrial engineer, but you've grown to see how this benefits you in terms of how you think and operate, and thinking through different ways to be innovative or creative. And maybe you are improving on things, but you haven't gone as far as saying, oh, well, it used to take us this much time in the current state. Now it's taking us this much time in the future state. So how do I introduce now other tools to start to link that together so that we can document and measure it?
Yeah, they start to see obvious areas for improvement just by documenting it. So by planting the tomato seed, once they start to see the sprout, they'll see all this other garden space, and they themselves arrive at the conclusion that there's more to do.
Yeah.
It's like an intuitive, natural next step that they see.
Or it opens up conversations where somebody's looking at it and somebody else can say, hey, why don't we try that differently? Or have you thought about doing it differently?
That's where you want to be.
That's a good idea. Let me scratch that out and, write something else there. So it allows you to play around with what if scenarios.
Yeah.
Now you're doing process simulations and you didn't even know it.
Yeah. That's where you want to be as an enterprise.
Right.
Is it a fair analogy to use like building a fire, where I think a lot of people here at Opex and a lot of companies approaching productivity optimization, hyperautomation, et cetera, they put the big logs on too soon.
And it smothers the fire.
Whereas,
or it can't get started because the logs are too large for it to catch.
Too wet. It's just not time yet.
Yeah.
Where counterintuitively, by starting small with the pine needles and then the smallest sized twigs, catching on to slightly larger sized twigs and slightly larger sized twigs, you're doing twigs for 6 months as a company, thinking that you'd be having a roaring bonfire by now, but counterintuitively, these twigs are going to accept larger and larger.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to it, though, just to kind of caveat it, is you're still building the larger bonfires with your highly skilled team. Let them go take the big logs and start those big fires on the strategic projects and priorities, but with the rest of the enterprise that you're trying to get to just think and change the way they think and apply these concepts, absolutely you have to start with a more grassroots organic approach that is palatable.
Okay.
Right.
So you're saying
and that catches fire and spreads.
There is room for both in a sizable enough enterprise.
I think so.
Where you have that super diverse, advanced squad of designers and process analysts, software engineers, data scientists, black belts that can build a bonfire.
That's
quickly.
Right.
They know how to do it.
They know how to do it.
They were hired because they've done it before.
That's exactly right.
Let them build their bonfires. Meanwhile, let the maybe culture, enablement, education, HR, internal team work on, everyone else, 99% of the company learn how to build a fire incrementally.
That's exactly right.
So both can happen.
Right. Both can happen. And when that happens, I think you'll see sure enough, as you're building the more broader cultural enablement with the smaller twigs and pine needles, you're still going out there with your specialized team to conquer the bigger bonfires. Yeah. But at some point, there's going to be an intersection where
things are heating up.
And the learning is growing on the cultural adaptation side to now you can expand and multiply even larger bonfires.
And I feel like that space there is strategic transformation, creating new business models. Yes. That's where disruption happens. Yeah. And that's the cool part. That's the cool part of what we do.
That's cool. And by the way, the cultural transformation, even though it's incremental and happening in parallel, that will help also with potentially identifying other key large bonfires that you need to redeploy your strategic team into to help with.
Yeah, they're identifying the next bonfire.
They're identifying that. Hey, we can assist you with that.
Yeah.
Right. So
let me help you build that.
Yeah. So I think it's we were talking earlier about the book Good to Great, right? Yep. And putting the right seats, right people in the right seats on the bus, right? And how Malcolm Gladwell, that's one of the big key takeaways of his book, right? Well, that same thing applies in an organization. Play to the strengths of the individuals that you have and their skills and their passion, and then start to incrementally develop their skills to help them to get even better at what they love doing. Don't try to turn them into the next bonfire builder in terms of a Lean Six Sigma master black belt or black belt or even a green belt.
Yeah. Some people love customer service.
Yeah.
So let them optimize for that. Here's just some tools to do it.
That's exactly right.
So I wanted to ask you about what philosophies or frameworks or methods or tools do you use? And I hope you have one or two tangible examples of those. But to summarize this past discussion, it seems like there isn't one.
No.
It seems like a methodology to continuous improvement is going to be forcing the business into a mold that isn't them, but rather this mindset, this mentality is the methodology. Yeah. Does that kind of sum it up?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I mean, so at Experian, for example, we leverage a suite of methods as our best practice standards, from Lean, Six Sigma, design thinking, Agile, PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act, A3 strategies. So again, what I would say is it's a culmination of those frameworks and methods. I would say there's definitely a predominant problem-solving foundation that is largely based off of Lean Six Sigma DMAIC framework. But we've even recently deployed something that we call our PDCA learning, which is kind of our light version of getting people oriented on process improvement or productivity improvement, which is how we refer to it. And it's part of our Empower program, because it's all about empowering individuals to be able to solve problems and improve how we work and grow the business as well. And so that PDCA is literally a one slider that gives them a template to follow for business as usual problems that they're solving on their own already, but giving them a way to document it so that they can show off the little wins that they're doing in their own spaces that may not be getting noticed or shared with their leadership, but also other employees could benefit from. Hey, look at this. Jimmy figured out a way to auto-file certain emails through some basic rules using Microsoft Outlook features.
He has zero inbox.
And that's helped with managing email administrative time that he was spending by 20 minutes a day.
Times 100,000 employees.
Now imagine if every employee applied those rule settings within Outlook, which doesn't require you to be a developer or have an engineering background to understand how to do. Times 100,000 employees, times 10,000 employees, what that adds up to. So I think the beauty is that as quick as technology evolves, a lot of our default applications and software these days have productivity apps and features built into them. And if you were to look at the statistics, I remember reading a study on this that was done years ago. It was something around like 67 or 70% of the workforce doesn't feel that they know how to leverage the common tools or applications and systems to their full extent.
It's a productivity problem.
Right. And so therein lies a challenge. Forget about teaching somebody how to do even a process map like we were talking about earlier. How do you teach them how to use Microsoft Outlook or Slack or Microsoft Teams or PowerPoint or Excel to increase their productivity?
That's starting with the basics right there. We're not anywhere near hyper-automation.
Take it back to basics. Right? I mean, and I'll be the first to admit, I'm not saying I know how to use every feature and capability, but I can tell you that I have learned a lot along the way in my career that does make me more productive and more effective at using those tools. And there's certain tools we will never get away from having to use in the business environment, like Microsoft PowerPoint, like Microsoft Excel, like some of the project management tools, whether that's Microsoft Teams or other features that we're using. And so, so it goes back to the learning platforms that we're creating within the organizations. Yes, there's an expectation when you hire somebody at a certain level that they already have experience using those tools. But how do you actually get them to master using the tools that you know they're going to be using on a day-to-day basis and give them the platform or ability to accelerate that and then do that across the organization, no matter what level they're at, right?
I hear you.
I think that's I know I just went down a completely different tangent, but to me, that's operational excellence if you can make that happen.
It speaks to teaching your employees productivity tools. There's
or just
value.
Teaching them how to use their tools in the most productive way.
Let me take a little left turn here, and I know we're coming up on time, so maybe this is the last or the rapid fire question here. Let's talk about a win. Let's talk about a success. The circumstances leading up to it, maybe the problem statement. how you went about solving the problem, what the outcome was. Talk us through either your favorite or the first win that comes to mind.
Yeah. Well, I kind of want to keep it on topic with the theme that we've been discussing, rather than going into a tactical win.
Sure.
Maybe share something more at kind of an adoption transformation level with the mindset of operational excellence and process improvement.
Perfect.
And maybe I'll give you two examples and try to keep them short. The first was more recently when I was at Intuit. Right, this was about 3 years ago, and one of the things that Intuit has done, which I think is phenomenal, is they've truly adopted as part of their culture, starting from the time that you onboard as an employee, training every single employee on their process improvement framework and mindset. At Intuit, it's called D for D, Design for Delight. I think it's a really cool term too, right? And it's very much foundationally based on design thinking principles. Okay. But I'll take it one step further. In addition to exposing the entire employee base to this as part of your onboarding, to say, hey, this is a part of how we think and how we operate and what comes into play with solving any problems here. A big part of the operational environment was something called Follow Me Homes. It was really cool. So we weren't literally following you home, because that would be a bit creepy, right? That's what I thought at first. Are we following people actually home? But it could be virtual, or it could be going to an office place or business, right? But the point was to walk the process, right? Gemba, right? If we take it back to the Japanese lean, principles, walk in the shoes of the individual, whether that's an employee, because that could be a customer, or an end customer, right? That's purchasing your product or service. But do it, not to do a time study or a process map, to observe and then ask questions.
It's like an empathy map on steroids.
Yes. And, it could be a 30-minute sit down. It could be a 1 hour sit down. But it was more just to kind of see, what are they going through, and pick up on things that they themselves may not mention are bothersome, but maybe have become a natural path in their cognitive way of performing the task that they don't realize is probably wasting a lot of time and could be solved much quicker. And you see it and you go, wow, that looks painful.
Yeah.
Right?
Let me solve that
for you. What if I could? And let me better understand why you went through all that trouble to get that one little piece of information submitted within the system. Right?
That's so cool.
And then the beauty of it was, we also, every employee had the ability to do this and could connect with the customer experience team if you were even looking for customers to perform it with.
Oh, wow.
To make that happen, and you could reward the people that allowed you to do it with a gift card or something to say, hey, thank you for that 1 hour of your time. Here's $100 gift card for letting us do that.
Take your family out to dinner.
And here, we're there helping them to solve a problem and paying them for it.
Yeah, get paid to have your problem solved for you.
Because this is helping us improve our products, our service, our processes to deliver the best experience, the best products, and also attract other customers and keep, hopefully, you as a customer.
That's putting your money where your mouth is.
And so, to me, I know that's not a tactical example, like when, going back to your question, but
seems idyllic. It seems utopian. Like, that may sound intimidating for our audience as too far off in the future. Is it?
I don't think so. Right? I mean, Intuit's been doing this for years. This isn't something Intuit's one of the oldest tech companies that's been around in Silicon Valley, if you will. Right? So I think it goes back to when you asked me the Venn diagram and I just kept on clicking on people. It really does start with getting the company at the executive level to say, this is something we have to build into our DNA. It's not a program that we just go out and support people with and try to build or use to try to slash costs and reduce waste. It comes back to why process improvement and operational excellence, I think, even as timeless as it should be, or why it's become a never ending part of how a business has to operate, which is bringing it back to the customer.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that.
And the customer is both internal and external, right? How do we make sure our employee experience is its best? And it all stems from the inside. If our employees are happy, if they're coming to work and they're feeling, oh man, I love what I do. I'm equipped with the tools that I need to. I can handle any job and it's not burdensome.
If something comes up, it gets solved for me.
It can get solved relatively quickly. Then guess what? The byproduct and output of that is a better service, better experience to the customer, and a better product.
Less turnover.
Less
hiring and training.
Exactly. More customer retention and more customer demand.
Yeah.
Let's take a very basic example. I'm going to turn a question to you.
Uh-oh.
What's something that you've purchased in the last year that was the first time you ever purchased that item, or just recently, let's call it, and you've fallen in love with it? Do you have an example of something like that?
Sure. My fiance and I live in the city and we're on top of a hill. So getting down to where the restaurants and where the fun is easy going down, but hard going back up. And I know we should be walking, but I'm thinking of our e-bikes.
Okay. Yeah. Fantastic. And do you talk about these e-bikes to everyone you talk to? And the specific brand of e-bike that you have?
Yeah. I send, here's $50 off to everyone because I also get $50 off.
I mean, you love it. Mm-hmm. All right. So I have a similar example. I've been a big wearables guy for a long time because of my passion for health and fitness. Right. Mm-hmm. So whether, I had some of the first wearable fitness watches from Garmin through Motorola. Not a lot of people knew Motorola created one too, long before some of the others were out on the market. This is even before Apple watches and stuff. And, I had known about one of the product lines on the market for a while, but never pulled the trigger on it, called Whoop. Right? Yeah. That's this bracelet that you see right here.
Yeah. Justin Thomas, the whole PGA loves it.
Yeah. And some of my friends that are also prior college athletes and really active, they have one. And so I was like, all right, I wanted to try to consolidate so that I didn't have to have multiple wearable devices because I liked the fact I could tell time and monitor metrics. But I'll tell you, it was a game changer for me in terms of just the precision and accuracy of the stats, and I share it with everybody. And people ask me about, hey, what is that? What are you doing? And I post about it. But there I am. I'm not being paid by Whoop to do that, right? But I'm sending discount codes for a month off. I'm talking about it. I'm wearing it every day. I've never slept with a wearable device. I haven't taken this thing off in 6 months.
Wow.
It's been fixated to my body.
That's sticky.
Right. I do wash it. Don't worry. Okay. So, but my point is that sentiment, that example of the e-bike, the wearable device, whatever it might be, it's contagious. Right? How do you create that contagious effect? Yeah. That same contagious effect for what you're doing in an organization, right? And the only way to do that is to create something that everybody falls in love with and sees value in. They see the relevance of it. Makes them more productive because then they're going to start spreading. Hey man, have you heard about this really cool tool that we use to map these processes? Oh my God, it's been a lifesaver. Yeah. Right. You want people in your organization talking about methods and tools the way you want your consumers of your products and services talking about your products and services.
Yeah.
And the same way that we talk about the latest iPhone or the latest Google Pixel or the latest e-bike.
Yeah.
So how do we make that environment right within our organization?
If you figure that out,
that's where operational excellence then ignites.
Yeah. So how about that as a North Star?
And spreads.
How about that as a North Star to nail the what do you even call that?
It's the experience.
The experience.
It's the
customer
experience. Yeah, it's the experience. We have to start figuring out, as transformation leaders, not, hey, here's a best practice methodology that's been proven and around for years and has worked for so many companies. No, how do you create a sexy and valuable product and service that your own employees, colleagues would be even willing to pay for if they had to?
Yeah. Yeah. There it is. That's the secret.
I will pay you money to make my job easier.
Yeah.
But they don't have to, which is even better.
Yeah.
Right.
No, as you're describing that, I'm recalling some clients who were a little skeptical about bringing, say, a bot in or a workflow app in, or even approaching continuous improvement. But once we took out the worst part of their day, it wasn't a quick win. It was immediate impact. They no longer had to run that report for 45 minutes every morning at 9 a.m., at 10 a.m. And they started thinking of, can we automate this? Can we automate that? Can we automate that? And now it's taking off like wildfire. That to me is how to connect this customer experience with hyper automation, digital business automation.
Yeah,
to experience it.
On the automation front, right? I mean, when I was at VMware and I started our business process excellence practice from the ground up. I also started our RPA, Center of Excellence, from the ground up. I remember when we set out to start introducing RPA to our various business leaders. And we said, we need to pilot it first to prove it out, to show that it can work. If we're going to get our executives to invest in it and also get others to say, okay, we're willing to listen. Because you can talk about every case study for every other company out there, but that's going to fall on a lot of deaf ears.
Yeah, it needs to work for you.
It needs to work for us, and it needs to be in an area of the business that really showed impact. So we said, let's not go with the traditional space or area where RPA is always deployed.
Well,
finance.
Yeah.
Right? We need to break the norm. We need to show, hey, we can do this in other areas. So we went to our sales organization.
Oh, wow.
Right. And we started with an executive town hall to introduce the concept of RPA. And we demystified it, as we like to call it. And really were very diligent about and careful about, sensitive about ensuring people understood this is a tool and an aid to help individuals, not to replace anyone.
Yep.
And our slogan, we even had a slogan, it was called freeing up the minds and time of employees to think and innovate.
That's great.
That was our slogan. So that's what it became. That was the agenda. How do we free up your time and your minds so that you can think more and innovate?
Yeah, we no longer have to carry water to and from the well.
That's right.
For 4 hours a day.
And so when we went to the sales organization, by the way, this was one of our biggest naysayers, right? Because that's also something I've enjoyed over the years is whenever you're met, and there's always going to be that one person that's like, this doesn't work, or I've seen this in other places, or they just don't, they're the disbelievers, right? Yeah. So I call this the baptism right? How do we baptize them, right?
Baptism by Peter Malek.
And so, because it's an awakening. They come out and they say, I'm a believer.
Yeah.
I'm a believer.
Yeah, that's what happens.
And when you can make the person that everybody in the organization knows is the disbeliever a believer, they're like, okay, something's up.
Yeah. I'm not going to fight.
I'm not going to fight because that's the person that always says no and pushes back. That's who you're after.
Oh, that's
especially if they're if they're in an influential part of the organization, right, or in an influential position, because they have a reputation of that. Right, it's not just with you.
They're very discerning.
Right. Yeah, half glass empty versus half glass full. So with the sales organization, I mean, we worked with. It happened to be timely because they were getting ready for seasonality volume increases that were going to be increasing with various. Sales deals, right? And sales
Q4,
right? And so they had to. This leader had to make a decision in a few months of whether they were going to hire more staff to support those volume increases, or if there was something that they could do to free up the time of existing resources that were already skilled on this to be able to handle the increase in volume demand, right? Therein kind of presented our RPA pilot and discovery, and we were able essentially through that effort within a 90-day effort, right? It was primarily working with transactions in Salesforce, but it was swivel chair, click level type tasks that was being done by a team that was offshore, right, in India, but there were 12 of them. And it was literally just volume of transactions of having to log into systems, copy over information, licensing keys, other critical information, and enter it into Salesforce, capture that information, and submit it and save it, right? So that we had that
doesn't
information
get more
stored.
Boring, manual, mundane, rote.
Very much repetitive, standard process that was ripe for automation in a non-traditional area of automation that you would typically start with. And we were able to essentially automate that process so that those 12 resources were able to be redeployed in the other area of the business where those volume increases were going to be incurred, but still also have some time in the event, right? Because you don't just automate and walk away. That if something did need to be handled manually still for any reason, exception handling, they could still handle those one-offs that would fall out.
Let me ask you a question. How do you think about either the spectrum or the connectivity of quick wins? I hate that term, but quick wins like that, where in 2 weeks you build a bot that puts up 100K, in value, versus the strategic transformational value. How do you do both? Is it from one leads to the other? Is it scraps make a pile? Is it the bonfires are burning while we're building our smaller fires?
So I think in an ideal state, right? My perspective is that if there are quick win automations that can be done, and for me, a quick win automation is something where you can have citizen developers, or there are these one-offs where your development team can handle X number of requests, but it's not going to impact or affect strategic automation initiatives that they're working on. Almost like they can work them in parallel. They're 2 week, 4 week type, working a little part-time on turnaround stuff to help enable, smaller teams or individuals within an organization.
Productivity.
Make that happen. If you have the licenses, that is, to do that, right? That's another, obviously, dilemma. It's like, you're not
part of the cost and the cost benefit.
You're not gonna just deploy every license on all your ants. But my philosophy, honestly, is that you should have an end-to-end roadmap strategy to where any of the automations you're doing, whether they're considered incremental quick wins, whether they're quick wins or not, right, should be tied to a a larger end-to-end goal.
Sure, like
right?
reduce cost by 10%.
And now what you're doing is applying agile principles, right? You're rolling out in sprints, automation increments of improvements and iterations of re-engineering until you get to that end state or North Star.
So it is do both. It's prioritize accordingly. Make sure, though, that it is all in line with a very high level strategy.
Yeah.
That start chipping away.
That you've aligned on with the executive leaders and the businesses, and now everybody's on board, and now this becomes your approach. And a great example of that too, which I think often gets overlooked too, is RPA, for instance, is a great also stepping stone while you look to overhaul technologies.
Yeah.
So perhaps
like to workflow.
Yeah. Or no, perhaps you're implementing a completely new system or platform.
Sure, like S/4HANA.
Yeah, but until you do that, you're still operating on your legacy system. But it could be a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year migration to get there. Well, you don't want to have to wait the 3 years to start to see the benefits. So if you can start to use other incremental enablement technologies like RPA to get you closer to what that platform will eventually give you, do that, and then turn off those automations as it gets replaced with the new technology that you've put in place, and redeploy those licenses or bots in other areas where you're still transforming, or maybe perhaps by that time you've done everything you need to.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that bots should be built to be turned off eventually.
Yeah.
They are high value Band-Aids that, shouldn't be around. If they're around for any longer than 3 to 5 years, then you're missing the bigger picture.
That's right. You're becoming overly dependent on, we shouldn't call a bot a Band-Aid fix, because
that doesn't do it enough justice.
It doesn't do it enough justice, but I think that, like you said, I think that's right. It's did we really make the changes that made sense? Now, there could be bots that maybe we could argue could be there indefinitely because there's small tasks and processes that aren't going to require.
There's no overhaul.
Yeah, there's no overhaul use case.
Just to be clear, I'm talking about, say there's HR employee onboarding.
Oh, yeah.
And in the first 6 months, you've automated ordering the uniforms with the bot, and then desk assignment with the second bot, and then setting up benefits with the third bot. If that's generating value for you in the first 6 months, great, keep it around for 3 years. But it sounds like or smells like an opportunity to overhaul your
whole HR end-to-end process. That's exactly right.
With something like workflow.
That's
now
exactly
you're
right.
going from 10 to 100K in value with each bot to call it $1 million in value
100%.
with a workflow app.
100%. I think we're out of time.
Yeah,
but
we could keep going for days,
no.
Peter.
This was hopefully this gave you some good arsenal for our viewers, guys. I really enjoyed the time, and
thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you. This was a pleasure. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Bots and Thoughts, the hyperautomation podcast, sponsored by Salient Process. Be sure to never miss an episode by hitting that subscribe button wherever you're listening to this. Get your hands on more content like this by following us on LinkedIn and YouTube down in the show notes, and say hello. We'd love to hear your thoughts, perhaps even on an upcoming episode. Stay tuned for more episodes of Bots and Thoughts, the hyperautomation podcast, brought to you by Salient Process.